Hey, comp covers. So we are starting Iran today, and as you all know, Iran has made a lot of news in recent years. It is essentially struggling to be the power of the Middle East, and so as a result, it has come into conflict with the United States quite a bit. You may have also heard of the Iran nuclear deal. So that is going to be something that is another source of tension between Iran and the Western world. We'll get into conflicts with Iran and all that kind of stuff as we move forward. But today, what I want to do is essentially take a look at Iran's in general. We'll briefly discuss some things. Maybe I'll put a video on. Um, I do want to show you a video from Fareed. So, Iran. So here it is located here on the map, and as you can see, um, I've heard, I don't know if this is, if you see it, but I've had on good sources that Iran is shaped like a cat. I don't know if you can see the head and the arch at the back, the front paws, that kind of thing. So, the cat of the Middle East. Uh, it is sandwiched here between Afghanistan and Iraq, and it is and has historically been an area that's been powerful. Now, Iran is a little different from the rest of the Middle East in the sense that ethnically they are not Arab. They are largely Muslim, yes, but not Arab. Ethnically, they identify as Persian, and they don't speak Arabic. Instead, they speak Farsi. So there is already here a little bit of an oddity with regard to Iran, although ancient, right? All right, so today we're going to start with with Iran's government, and so this is again in a very unique situation. It's operating under the Constitution of 1979. You're going to find that 1979 um, is a big year for Iran. It is when it had its major revolution that altered the system of government that Iran operates under. You may have heard of the 1979 Iranian Revolution. So basically, things started for them modern wise in 1979. They have what's known as a dual executive. They have a head of state, which is the supreme leader, and head of government, which is it's called a president, although they do not have a presidential system. It's actually a parliamentary system. So, what's interesting about the supreme leader is, let's underscore the word supreme. This person holds basically all the power in Iran. There's only been two supreme leaders, Ayatollah Khomeini, who started the Iranian Revolution in 1979. And when he died in 1989, 10 years later, we have the current uh, uh, supreme leader. His name is Khomeini. So, unfortunately for you guys, their names are relatively similar. So, let's take a look at. Oh, we are. Oh, here we go. So, the supreme leader. Um, we do see in Iran's government there is a theocratic element to it as well as a democratic element to it. Hovering above everything is the theocratic institutions, meaning this is a religiously based government. And so the supreme leader, of course, is going to be head of this religious organization. And he's often titled the Ayatollah. So the Ayatollah is a title, it's a male cleric, it's the highest male cleric. The Ayatollah of Iran is considered the Imam of the entire community, which basically means he is the most expert in interpretation of Sharia law. So he is a religious expert, the religious expert. And so the Ayatollah um, is appointed for life. It is appointed by a body known as the Assembly of Religious Experts. and can be removed by the Assembly of Religious Experts, although highly, highly, highly unlikely, considering the fact of what the assembly is made up of, which we'll get to later. Um, Another power that the Ayatollah has is the faka, and the faka is a position in which he, the Ayatollah, represents the will of God here on earth. So his interpretation of Sharia, his um, interpretation of law is divine. And as the faqih, he is the leading Islamic jurist to interpret the meaning of religious law. Okay, so what kinds of powers does the supreme leader or the Ayatollah have? Oh well, like I said, the leading jurist to interpret religious text, religious documents, and religious law, often referred to as Sharia law, which is um, a Muslim's interpretation of the Quran. Um, the supreme leader is a blend of all three branches of government and does serve to mediate between the three branches. He is charged with determining the interests of Islam. So not only is he in charge of, um, you know, Islam as almost a pope like figure for this group of Muslims, but he's also operating in the best interest of the Iranian people. He has got quite a bit of power. He approves the presidential ballot. So anybody who runs for president must first be approved by the Ayatollah. And the Ayatollah can overrule any decree made by the president, can dismiss the president from office. The Ayatollah is in charge of the armed forces, can declare war, can make peace treaties, can issue declarations of referendums. So, as you all remember, a referendum is when a vote on a particular item goes before the people. So, only the Ayatollah can issue that declaration of a referendum. Appoints all members to the judiciary, which is why the judiciary branch is not independent. Appoints half of the Guardian Council, and we'll get to the powerful Guardian Council in a moment. And here's this next power we're going to see is how the Ayatollah basically keeps the people of Iran loyal to him. And this is a huge power. He appoints the head of Friday prayer. So in Iran, they do have Friday prayer, which is a big deal in Iran. And it's the Ayatollah who appoints the leaders to head the Friday prayer. Also, the Ayatollah heads up anything that is broadcast on radio and television. So he has final authority and final say in that. So, again, influencing the general public. Okay, so let's switch from the head of state to the head of government. So, the president. The president is more of a democratic institution, whereas the Ayatollah is more of a theocratic part of the institution. The current president of Iran is Hassan Rouhani. Um, and Rouhani is considered to be head of government. This is not a presidential system, although he is called a president. He's head of government and directly elected by the people um, in a majority system. And if you don't get the majority, that's 50 plus one, then it goes to a second ballot. He is the highest authority after the supreme leader, and is directly elected every 4 years uh, and limited to 2 consecutive terms. However, like we saw in Russia, there is no total term limit, meaning that he can serve 8 years, take 4 years off, and then run again. The president does not have to be a religious cleric, but must be Shia Muslim. So we touched a little bit about Shiism in Nigeria. What that basically means, there are two types of Muslims. There are Shia Muslims and Sunni Muslims, and the heart of the difference is really in the succession of Muhammad. Um, the Sunnis believe that uh, the successor to Muhammad, should be chosen by a council of religious experts, whereas Shia Muslim believes it's a hereditary situation. So most of Iran are Shia. They are a minority around the world. Most Muslims are actually Sunni Muslims, but in Iran, the majority are Shia. Okay, so president's powers. The president is basically in charge of government, and so he creates the budget, supervises the economy, proposes some legislation, also can sign treaties, chairs the National Security Council, selects vice president, selects cabinet, appoints ambassadors. And the cabinet basically runs day to day governance uh, of Iran. Okay, so moving to the legislature. So the legislature has both theocratic and democratic, which is hidden, components. And I'll kind of outline which one's which. There are four bodies, but I guess it's a little complicated. But the parliamentary body is called the Majlis. The Majlis are more secular, more traditional in terms of a legislative body, a parliamentary body. So this is part of their democratic institution. It is unicameral. There is only one body. It holds 290 seats, and members to the Majlis are directly elected by the people to 4-year terms. Um, all candidates to run for the Majlis are approved by the Guardian Council. This is another body, which I'll get to later. Um, they are elected by single member districts. Anyone over the age of 18 can vote, which includes women. Um, and there are two major bodies within the Majlis. Sometimes it's dominated by reformers, and sometimes it's dominated by hardliners or conservatives. So reformers tend to be a little bit more pushing towards modernization, where conservatives or hardliners tend to stick to traditional, even more religious life. So the Majlis has the power to introduce and pass legislation. Most of the legislation is proposed by the president, although the supreme leader can step in and do the same. The Majlis approves 6 members of the Guardian Council. There's actually 12 total members of the Guardian Council. 6 are appointed by the Supreme Leader, and the other 6 members of the Guardian Council are nominated uh, by the Chief Judge. We'll get to that in a second. So, the Majlis also approves president's choice of cabinet, so there's a confirmation process, and can also remove cabinet members. The Majlis also approves the budget, which is a big power of the president. All right, so moving away from this large legislative body called the Majlis, we're going to see there are these addendum bodies. One of which is called the Guardian Council, and this is part of the theocratic institution, whereas the Majlis is part of the democratic institution. The Guardian Council is part of the theocratic institution. And like I said, there are 12 male, always male, clerics, 6 appointed by the chief judge. Now, the chief judge is also appointed by the supreme leader, and 6 of these appointments must be clerics. As you can see here, these are clerics with the robes and that kind of thing. So they're religious experts. The other 6 are approved by the Majlis, and these over here are experts in law. These are secular or lay people. So this is meant to be a balance and a reflection of the theocratic and democratic institutions within the Iranian state. They do serve 6-year terms. Bills passed by the Majlis are reviewed by the Guardian Council to ensure that it is not going against any kind of religious law or Sharia. So the Guardian Council can veto legislation. The other big powers, there's 2 major powers that they have. Review legislation. They basically have judicial review. And they vet political candidates in any election. So anybody in Iran who runs for any elected seat has to be vetted, meaning had to be checked and approved by the Guardian Council. So this is a very powerful organization. Okay, another body is going to be the Expediency Council. This is also a part of the theocratic institutions. It's made up of 32 men, again men, appointed by the supreme leader, and it includes some of the biggest, most powerful political figures in Iran, including the president, that chief judge, the speaker of the Majlis, and the Guardian Council. All make up this 32 member group. It was actually created in 1988 to serve, and its function is to be a referee between the Guardian Council and the Majlis. So this is supposed to give a bit of an illusion of checks and balances, right? So that any disputes that may arise between the more secular Majlis and then the more religious but also secular Guardian Council is to be reviewed by the Expediency Council. They're chosen to serve every 5 years by the Supreme Leader. Um, and it is essentially like the Politburo. It is a delegation that has, a lot of informal power, uh, and it can also originate its own legislation. So our final legislative assembly is going to be the Assembly of Religious Experts. Um, and so it is made up, as you can see here, of 86 to 88 male members directly elected every 4 years. Um, and they are religious experts. They must meet 2 times every 6 months, but their purpose is a bit unclear. There's no responsibility over legislation or day to day governances, um, but they are elected by the people, which is why they are more of a democratic institution, because they are directly elected by the Iranian people to serve every 4 years. Um, this body has the power to remove the supreme leader or appoint a new one. Um, and so you would think, wow, if they can remove the supreme leader, they're a really powerful body. And they are, but the way that the structure is organized is that they're essentially a rubber stamp organization, because all candidates have to be approved by the Guardian Council and the head judge, all of which is appointed by the supreme leader. So this is going to remain a relatively conservative, relatively non reformist organization. So, as a result, we have not seen a lot of turmoil with regard to the life appointments of supreme leaders. We've only had two since 1979, and the first one ended because he died. All right, so the judiciary. So, the judiciary is not independent because the judges are appointed by the supreme leader. The courts are divided by function. There's a civil and criminal court, and they do have an appeals process. There is no judicial review. The supreme leader, the Guardian Council, and religious experts have final say in interpreting the law, so there is no judicial review here. So it's not necessarily an independent jury. It's headed by the chief judge. I keep referring to this guy, the chief judge. It's a cleric who needs understanding of Sharia law, appointed by the supreme leader, and oversees the courts. The legal system is divided between Sharia law, this is Islamic canonical law. No secular law can contradict Sharia law. And then there's the Ganun, which is the secular or non sacred legislative laws. And this covers business contracts, labor standards, the environment, so anything non religiously affiliated. So it is a two-tiered system. And what is interesting about the judiciary is that they have what's known as an inquisitional, sorry, inquisitorial, inquisitorial system instead of an adversarial system. What does that mean? So under an adversarial system, we know that there is a prosecutor versus the defense for anyone who is accused. And generally, in an adversarial system, when we pit one versus the other, both sides present their arguments, and then a jury um, or a judge listens and determines guilt or innocence. That is not the case in Iran. Instead, what they have is that the judge takes sole responsibility to find the facts of a case, and he basically finds those facts by talking to the defendant, talking to the prosecutors, meaning the people who brought suit against a particular person. So it could be the state that brought suit, could be police, could be civil. So it's the judge that basically takes sole responsibility to fact find and determine guilt or innocence. All right, so that ends our first frame in Iran. Um, I'm going to go ahead and begin the next frame with some reflections from Fareed Zakaria. So watch for that in the next frame. Stay safe, guys.